That night, the cold bit worse than teeth. My bones felt like they might crack from the shivering, like someone was taking a hammer to each joint, one by one. The train car I'd found wasn't much better than being outside, just four rusted walls keeping the worst of the blizzard away, while the wind howled through every crack and broken window. I'd wrapped myself in everything I had: 2 shirts, 1 sweater, my only jacket, and a thin blanket I'd grabbed in the panic. Wasn't nearly enough. My fingers had gone from burning to numb, which I knew wasn't a good sign. The Iron Ridge pack was probably 20 miles away by now, all warm and safe in their winter territory. All of them except me. Defective, Alpha Colton had called me that morning, right in front of everyone. His face had that disgusted look, like he'd stepped in something foul. We don't waste resources on defectives during migration. I remember how he'd looked at me with those cold blue eyes, how the gray in his military short hair caught the morning light as he'd turned away, how nobody, not a single person I'd grown up with, had said a word against him. The shivering got worse. I tucked my hands under my armpits, tried to curl tighter into myself on the metal floor. My teeth chattered so hard I thought they might break. 26 years old, and this was how it would end. Thelma Fig, frozen to death because she couldn't howl right. That was my great defect. My whisper howl, they called it. When other wolves in human form shifted their voices to communicate across distances, theirs came out powerful, commanding. Mine came out as barely more than a breath, a whisper where there should have been strength. Useless for pack communication, useless for warnings, useless for hunts, useless Thelma. I forced myself to stand. My legs shook so bad I had to grab the wall. Had to keep moving or I'd never move again. The abandoned train, 7 cars derailed and forgotten years ago in this northern wilderness, stretched in both directions. Maybe another car would be less drafty. Maybe I'd find something else to burn besides the 3 pieces of broken chair that had given me 20 minutes of warmth before dying out. I stumbled toward the door connecting to the next car. My fingers were too numb to feel the handle properly, and I had to use both hands to yank it open. The wind nearly knocked me back as I stepped onto the coupling platform. 1 second outside felt like an hour in the freezing air. The next car wasn't much different. Passenger seats ripped to shreds, windows broken. Nothing to burn, nothing to help. My thoughts started getting fuzzy around the edges. Bad sign. Really bad sign. I'd seen hypothermia take down stronger wolves than me. The way it tricks you into feeling warm right before you freeze to death. Makes you want to just lie down and sleep. I forced myself forward. Next car. Then the next. The dining car still had tables bolted to the floor. Shattered plates crunched under my boots. My brain kept wandering off, thinking about stupid things, wondering if my parents would ever know what happened to me. They'd given me up to the pack when I was 8, once my whisper howl showed itself. Probably wouldn't care much either way. I caught myself leaning against a booth, eyes drifting closed, pinched my arm hard enough to leave marks. "Keep moving, Thelma," I muttered. My voice sounded strange, slurred. That's when I heard it, a soft whine, almost lost in the wind. I wasn't alone. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I peered through the darkness toward the far end of the dining car. At first, I thought it was just shadows, my eyes playing tricks from the cold and exhaustion. Then one of the shadows moved. I froze, not from the cold this time. 4 massive wolves huddled together in the corner where the dining car met the kitchen area. Not regular wolves. These were Arctic wolves, with thick white fur now matted with what looked like blood in places. And they were huge. Biggest wolves I'd ever seen. Each one probably weighed as much as me. They'd arranged themselves in a defensive position, 2 watching the doors, while 2 rested in the middle. Even with my human eyes in the dim light, I could see intelligence in their positioning. These weren't just animals. These were shifters in wolf form, and from their size and coordination, elite guards of some kind. The nearest one's eyes caught mine, pale blue against white fur. Its lip curled, showing teeth, but the growl that followed sounded weak, forced. I should have backed away, should have run to another car, but something held me there, looking at them. Their fur was caked with ice in places. One had a gash down its side that had barely stopped bleeding. Another's paw was bent at an unnatural angle. They were hurt bad and trying to keep warm the only way wolves can. Pressed together, sharing body heat. These weren't just any shifters. They were someone important's protection. And they'd been attacked, left behind, or lost in the storm. I recognized that look in their eyes. Not just pain or fear, it was the look of outcasts, abandoned, same as me. My body was still shaking uncontrollably, but my mind cleared for a moment. We were all fighting the same enemy tonight. Not each other, the cold, and none of us would survive alone. I stood there shaking, staring at those 4 wolves huddled in the dining car corner. Hurt, cold, alone, just like me. Something clicked in my head right then. We weren't going to make it through this blizzard separated. My hands were still numb, but I could see their injuries clear enough. The gash on the big one's flank, another with a paw bent wrong. Angry red marks on the smallest. Blood had matted their fur in patches. I didn't think twice, just started unzipping my jacket. "Hold on," I whispered, though they probably couldn't understand. "I'm gonna help." My fingers fought me every step, but I managed to tear strips from the jacket's inner lining. Wasn't like it was keeping me warm enough anyway. The fabric ripped with a satisfying sound that echoed through the empty train car. The wolves watched, ears twitching, as I approached real slow. "Easy now," I said, showing them the makeshift bandages. "Just trying to help." The one with the gash, big silver fellow with a scar across his muzzle, growled low when I got close. Can't blame him. Probably thought I was gonna finish whatever hurt him started. I stopped, crouched down to look less threatening. "I know," I said. "I'm scared too." Took maybe 15 minutes of gentle movements before he let me near enough to wrap the worst cut. Blood soaked through right away, but at least it'd keep dirt out. The others watched, golden eyes never leaving my hands. My stomach growled something fierce, reminding me none of us had eaten. Food. We needed food. "Gonna check the kitchen," I told them, like they were people who could answer back. Funny how quick you start talking to anything when you've been alone long enough. I stumbled through the connector to the next car, the kitchen area. Wind whistled through broken windows, sending napkins and paper wrappers dancing across the floor. Place had been ransacked ages ago, but people miss things when they're in a hurry. I started pulling open cabinets, checking under counters. Jackpot behind the 3rd cabinet. Emergency rations. Looked like train staff had their own stash. 4 sealed packages of preserved meat, some hard cheese wrapped in wax, and a couple tins of something. Wasn't gonna get picky. I stuffed everything into my sweater pouch and headed back. The wolves perked up when I returned, noses twitching at the smell. I unwrapped the meat first, breaking it into chunks. "Not much," I said, "but it's something." Then it happened. Something I never expected. Instead of snatching the food, I watched them look at each other, some silent communication passing between them. The smallest whined, and the others seemed to nod. The big silver one, clearly their leader, approached me slow and careful. I held out a piece of meat flat on my palm. He sniffed it, then looked right into my eyes. Never seen anything so human in an animal before. He took the meat gentle as could be, carried it back, and dropped it in front of the smallest wolf with the infected paw. "Well, damn," I whispered. "You take care of your own, too." I divided everything else, making sure each got something. The cheese went quick. Probably the first real meal they'd had in days, same as me. While they ate, I tried something I hadn't done in front of others since the pack laughed me out. I whisper howled. It's hard to describe my voice. Not a proper howl like other wolves manage. Just this broken, soft sound that doesn't carry past 10 feet. Useless for pack hunting or territory calls. The thing that made me defective. But these wolves, they stopped eating. All 4 heads turned toward me, ears forward, listening. The big silver one tilted his head, like he was really trying to understand. "Yeah," I said, feeling stupid tears burning behind my eyes. "That's all I got. Pathetic, right?" He stood up then, this massive creature that could have torn my throat out without trying. Walked right up to me, slow and deliberate. I held my breath, wondering if I'd misread everything. He stopped just inches from my face, his breath warm in the freezing air. Then he touched his muzzle to my hand, gentle as a kiss, like a thank you, My heart nearly stopped. 26 years alive, and no one, not the parents who gave me away, not the pack that rejected me, had ever made me feel understood like this wolf did with that single gesture. I spotted a first aid kit mounted on the wall near the conductor's door. Red Cross faded but still visible. Inside was basic stuff. Antiseptic, gauze, tape. Better than nothing. The youngest wolf with the infected paw needed it most. "Hey, little one," I coaxed, kneeling beside her. "This might sting." She whimpered when the antiseptic hit the wound, but didn't snap or pull away. Just watched me with those intelligent eyes. As I worked, something strange happened. It was like invisible threads were weaving between us, a connection I couldn't see but could definitely feel. Like we belonged together, these outcasts and me. By the time I finished, my eyelids weighed 1,000 pounds each. The temperature had dropped even further, and my body was giving up the fight to stay warm. The wolves must have sensed it, because the big silver one made a soft chuffing noise, and they all moved closer, creating a circle around me. "Guess we're bunkmates tonight," I mumbled, too exhausted to care anymore. I curled up on the floor, using my arm as a pillow. Within seconds, I felt warm fur press against my back. Then another wolf settled against my legs. The other two completed the circle, their bodies radiating heat like furry furnaces. The youngest rested her head on my arm, her breath warm against my wrist. For the first time since Colton had announced me useless to the Iron Ridge pack, I didn't feel alone. As my eyes drifted closed, I realized something important. Sometimes family isn't who you're born to. Sometimes it finds you in an abandoned train car during the worst blizzard in 50 years. That night, surrounded by wolves who had every reason to distrust humans, I slept without freezing to death. Our combined warmth, a tiny island of life in that endless cold night. I woke up warm. That was the first surprise. The second was finding myself alone. The wolves were gone, all 4 of them. Not even the little one with the infected paw had stuck around. Just me, lying there on the cold metal floor of that abandoned train car, wrapped in nothing but my own clothes and the memory of shared body heat. "Hello?" my voice cracked, dry from sleep and cold. No answer, just the howling wind outside. I sat up, wincing as my muscles complained. "Spending the night curled up on a metal floor'll do that to you." I rubbed my eyes and looked around proper. Yep, definitely alone. The torn strips of my jacket lining lay scattered where I'd bandaged the injured wolves. Spots of dried blood marked the floor where the big silver one had bled. "Guess that's gratitude for ya," I muttered, though I couldn't really blame 'em. Wild things gotta do what wild things gotta do. Still, I'd thought, well, doesn't matter what I thought. I struggled to my feet and shuffled to one of the windows. The blizzard had died down some, but snow still fell in fat, lazy flakes. Enough light came through that I could see outside better than yesterday. That's when I noticed them. Paw prints. Massive ones. They circled the train car in wide, deliberate patterns. Not random tracks of animals just passing by. No, these were the tracks of sentinels. Guards. They'd been protecting the train while I slept. I pressed my face to the cold glass, following the tracks with my eyes. They went round and round, crossing each other, doubling back. 4 different sets, each with its own pattern. The biggest set had to be the silver wolf, had the widest circuit. The smaller ones stayed closer, but together they'd created a perfect perimeter. "They were watching over me," I whispered, my breath fogging the glass. The paw prints led away from the train eventually, heading north. All except one set. The largest tracks approached the train car door, and then changed. Where there should have been more paw prints, there were now boot prints, human boot prints. My heart thumped hard against my ribs. Shapeshifters. Real, honest-to-God shapeshifters. I'd suspected it last night, seeing the intelligence in those wolves' eyes, but seeing the proof made my mouth go dry. A shadow fell across the snow outside. I jerked back from the window, nearly tripping over my own feet. Someone was out there, someone big. The door to the dining car creaked open, letting in a blast of cold air and a dusting of snow. I backed up until my legs hit one of the bolted-down tables, fingers curling around the edge for support. He had to duck to enter, 6.5 feet at least, with shoulders broad as a doorframe. Black hair dusted with snowflakes, skin the color of burnished olive wood, and eyes. Those eyes, golden, intelligent, the exact same eyes I'd stared into last night when I'd bandaged the silver wolf's flank. The words died in my throat. Alive thanks to you. His voice was deep, resonant. He brushed snow from a leather coat that looked a hell of a lot warmer than my tattered jacket. I apologize for startling you. My pack went to secure the perimeter and hunt. I wanted to thank you properly. You're the wolf. It wasn't a question. The silver one, with the cut. He nodded, one hand unconsciously touching his side, where I'd wrapped the makeshift bandage. I am Calvin Yang. The name hung in the air between us. He seemed to be waiting for some kind of reaction. I'm Thelma, I offered. Thelma Fig. Something flickered in those golden eyes. Recognition, disappointment. Hard to tell. You don't know who I am. Again, not a question. I shrugged. Should I? Perhaps not. The Iron Ridge pack keeps to itself. He stepped further into the car, movements fluid and graceful despite his size. I am the Wolf King of the Northern Kingdoms. Now that got my attention. Stories about the Wolf King were legend even in our isolated pack. Tales of a ruler so powerful he could command not just wolves, but bears, eagles, even the savage, dire wolves that roam the far north. I'd always figured they were just that, stories. You're shitting me. The words slipped out before I could stop them. His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. I assure you I am not shitting you. Awkward silence stretched between us until I blurted, Why were you in wolf form in an abandoned train car during a blizzard? Don't kings have, I don't know, castles and stuff? My elite guard and I were ambushed 3 days ago by a faction that does not wish for peace in the north. We were separated from our main forces, wounded, and forced to flee. The storm was both curse and blessing. It covered our tracks, but nearly killed us. He gestured to the scattered bandage materials, until you found us. I didn't really find you, I corrected. More like we found each other, both of us running from the cold. He studied me, those golden eyes seeming to look straight through me. Why were you alone in the storm, Thelma Fig? Where is your pack? The question stung more than it should have. They decided I wasn't worth the resources, called me defective. I lifted my chin, daring him to agree. I can't howl proper. Just got this pathetic little whisper howl that's useless for communication. Calvin went still. So still it was like he'd turned to stone. You whisper howled. Last night while tending to my packmates. Heat crept up my neck. Yeah, sorry about that. Old habit. Do it again. What? Your whisper howl. I need to hear it. I stared at him, confused, and more than a little embarrassed. Why would you want to hear the very thing that got me kicked out of my pack? Please. There was something in his voice. Urgency, maybe even a touch of desperation. Fine. Whatever. Not like I had any dignity left to lose. I closed my eyes, let my throat relax, and released the soft, breathy sound that was as natural to me as breathing. Not the full-throated roar of a proper werewolf howl, but something quieter, more melodic, rising and falling like a night breeze through pine trees. When I opened my eyes, Calvin had dropped to one knee before me, head bowed. What the hell are you doing? I backed up another step, bumping hard against the table. Showing respect, he said, voice rough with emotion. Thelma Fig, what you possess is not a defect. It is an ancient gift known as the spirit voice. So rare that the last recorded shifter born with it lived over 200 years ago. I blinked. Come again? He rose to his feet. Your whisper howl can calm savage beasts, communicate across species barriers. It's why my wolves, why we, responded to you last night, despite our injuries and fear. We felt your intent, your compassion, through your voice. I shook my head. That's not possible. The Iron Ridge Pack, Calvin's jaw tightened. They rejected you because they failed to recognize your extraordinary value, not because of any weakness on your part. Their ignorance is matched only by their arrogance. A laugh bubbled up, bitter and sharp. So you're telling me the thing that made me an outcast is actually some rare superpower. That's convenient. I understand your skepticism. He stepped closer, and I caught his scent, pine and wood smoke and something wilder beneath. But I have spent months searching for someone with your talent, Thelma. Months of following rumors and legends, seeking the one person who might help prevent a catastrophe. What catastrophe? His expression darkened. War. My kingdom sits at a fragile crossroads between various supernatural factions. Werewolves, bear shifters, dire wolves, and others. Tensions have been building for years. Now they threaten to explode into a conflict that would devastate the North. I folded my arms across my chest. And what exactly am I supposed to do about that? Whisper howl them into playing nice? In a manner of speaking, yes. He met my eyes directly. The spirit voice doesn't just communicate. It soothes. It creates understanding where none existed before. It can bridge gaps between species that have hated each other for centuries. Part of me wanted to laugh in his face. Another part, the part that remembered how those wolves had curled around me last night, how we'd understood each other without words, wondered if maybe, just maybe, he was telling the truth. So what now, I asked. You expecting me to just up and follow you to your kingdom based on a fairy tale about my so-called gift? Calvin's golden eyes never left mine. I'm offering you purpose, Thelma Fig, a chance to be valued for exactly who you are, to be needed for the very thing that others rejected. And damn if that didn't hit me right where I lived. 3 days into our trek toward Calvin's mountain home, and my legs were burning something fierce. Never been much for hiking, especially uphill in snow that came halfway to my knees. We'd been following this narrow pass between two massive mountain faces for most of the morning, walls of rock and ice towering up on either side of us, like we were ants crawling through some giant sidewalk crack. Not much farther to the valley crossing, Calvin called back, his breath puffing white in the cold air, easy for him to say with those long legs. He moved through the snow like it wasn't even there. The other 3 shifters, Calvin's guards who I'd bandaged back in the train, formed a protective triangle around us. Didn't know their names yet. They weren't much for talking. I was about to ask how much farther, not much farther, actually meant when I felt it. A low rumble under my boots, more like a feeling than a sound. Then came the noise, a deep cracking that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Avalanche, Calvin shouted. Run! I didn't need to be told twice. We all took off, plowing through the snow as fast as we could manage. The rumble grew louder, turning into a freight train roar that bounced between the canyon walls. I risked a look over my shoulder and wished I hadn't. A wall of white was bearing down on us, swallowing everything in its path. Calvin grabbed my arm and yanked me toward an outcropping of rock. Here! We dove behind it, just as the massive snow thundered past. The force of it slamming into our shelter hard enough, I thought the rock might give way. The air filled with an icy mist that stung my face and made it impossible to see more than a foot ahead. My ears popped from the pressure change, and I curled into a tight ball, pressing my back against the rock and praying it would hold. Couldn't have been more than 30 seconds, but felt like hours before the roaring stopped. The silence after was almost as scary. You okay? Calvin asked, brushing snow from my shoulders. I nodded, too shaken to speak right away. When I finally got my breath back, I asked, The others? Calvin stood up, scanning the canyon. Marco! Lena! Darius! He called out. A muffled voice responded from somewhere to our left. Then another. Within minutes, the 3 guards had found their way to us. All of them covered head to toe in snow, but otherwise unharmed. That's when the real problem became clear. Both ends of the canyon were completely blocked by walls of snow and debris 30 feet high at least. We were trapped in a section maybe 100 yards long, with sheer rock faces on either side too steep to climb. Well, I said, brushing snow from my pants, this is just perfect. Calvin was already assessing the situation, eyes scanning the snow walls, the rock faces, the sky above. We have enough food for 2 days if we ration, he said. Water won't be a problem with all this snow. And after 2 days, I asked? He didn't answer, which told me everything I needed to know. The female guard, Lena, I figured, was sniffing the air. There's something else, she said, her voice tight. We're not alone. Calvin tensed up immediately, his body going rigid. Then I caught it too, a musky, wild scent carried on the wind. different from the clean pine needle smell of Calvin's pack. "Dire wolves," Calvin said, his voice dropping low. "Philip's pack." The way he said it made my stomach knot up. I'm guessing they're not friendly? They've been pushing at our borders for months. Philip wants our hunting grounds. Calvin turned to the guards. "Weapons ready, form a perimeter." They moved into position without question, pulling knives from sheaths. I noticed they didn't have guns. Most shifters didn't. Something about the noise hurting their sensitive ears. Right then, I was wishing for a nice loud pistol. They came in slowly, appearing at the top edges of the canyon like shadows. Massive wolves, bigger than any I'd ever seen, and I'd grown up around werewolves. These beasts stood as tall as horses, with heads the size of beer kegs, and teeth like hunting knives. I counted 12 of them, their fur a mix of gray and brown, muscles rippling under thick winter coats. One wolf, bigger than the rest with reddish fur, moved to the center position. His amber eyes seemed to glow as he stared down at us. "Philip," Calvin muttered. "He's going to enjoy this." The dire wolves started descending the snow piles, moving with a confidence that said they knew they had us cornered. 5 guards against 12 massive predators. The math wasn't working in our favor. "We can't fight our way out of this," I whispered, watching as they formed a semicircle, cutting off any chance of escape. Something clicked in my head then. A crazy idea, but maybe the only one we had. "I want to try something," I said, stepping forward before Calvin could stop me. "Thelma, don't—" But I was already walking toward the center of the canyon, hands empty and visible at my sides. The big red wolf, Philip, cocked his head, obviously confused by this small human walking right up to him. A deep growl rumbled from his chest, a sound that vibrated through the ground and up through my boots. I stopped about 15 feet away from him, close enough to smell his breath, a mix of pine and something metallic that might have been blood. I was terrified, not gonna lie. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. But some weird calm settled over me too. I took a deep breath and let out my whisper howl. It wasn't loud, never had been, but in the stillness of that canyon, it carried. A soft, melodic sound that seemed to hang in the air like mist. Philip's ears perked up, his growl cutting off mid-rumble. The other wolves shifted uneasily, looking to their alpha for direction. I kept going, letting the sound flow naturally. Wasn't trying to say anything specific, just reaching out, trying to connect. The big wolf took a step forward, then another. I heard Calvin curse behind me, probably thinking I was about to get my throat ripped out. But Philip's posture had changed. The aggression was draining away, replaced by curiosity. He stopped just a few feet from me, those amber eyes locked on mine. I kept the whisper howl going, adding a slight lift at the end that felt right somehow. Then the strangest thing happened. Philip sat down, just plopped his massive rear end in the snow like an oversized dog waiting for a treat. The other wolves followed suit, one by one, until the whole pack was sitting there staring at me. I let the sound fade naturally, and when I finished, Philip gave a soft whine. He stood up, shook his coat, then turned and trotted back up the snow pile. The others followed, and within minutes, they disappeared over the ridge. Just like that, they were gone. I stood there for a long moment, not quite believing what had happened. Then I turned around to find Calvin and his guards staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Holy shit," Lena whispered. Calvin was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, amazement mixed with something deeper. "That's exactly what I was talking about," he said quietly. The spirit voice. "You just saved all our lives without a drop of blood spilled." The way he was looking at me made my cheeks heat up despite the cold. No one had ever looked at me like that before. Like I was something valuable, something special. "They're going to dig us out," I said, changing the subject. "Philip and his pack." Calvin's eyebrows shot up. "How do you know that?" I shrugged. No, they'll be back, but not to fight." Sure enough, about an hour later, we heard digging from the north end of the canyon. By nightfall, Philip's pack had cleared a path wide enough for us to pass through. They watched from a distance as we made our way out. Not friendly exactly, but not hostile either. Calvin nodded respectfully to Philip as we passed. And the big wolf returned the gesture with a slight dip of his head. That's never happened before, Calvin told me as we continued our journey. Philip's been trying to take territory from us for years. Maybe he just needed someone to listen, I said. 2 days later, we reached Calvin's stronghold, a massive structure built into the side of the tallest mountain I'd ever seen. Guards saluted as we approached, massive iron gates swinging open to admit their king. Welcome to the Northern Kingdoms, Calvin said, ushering me through. I'd never seen anything like it. The entrance opened into a huge cavern lit by a combination of electricity and torchlight, the walls decorated with tapestries and weapons. People moved about with purpose, some in modern clothes, others in what looked like traditional garb. Calvin led me through a series of corridors and up several flights of stairs before we reached a large set of wooden doors carved with wolf designs. 2 guards pushed them open, and we entered what I guessed was the war room. A long table dominated the center, covered in maps and documents. Around it stood about a dozen people who fell silent as we entered. My counsel, Calvin said. I've called you here to meet Thelma Fig. She possesses the spirit voice. An older woman with copper skin and tribal tattoos along her collarbone stepped forward, sizing me up with piercing hazel eyes. This is who you went searching for? She's barely more than a girl. General Edith, Calvin said, by way of introduction. My military commander. A man with a neatly trimmed beard and calculating eyes spoke next. Her former pack rejected her as defective. Now we're to accept her as an advisor. His tone made it clear what he thought of that idea. Christian, Calvin said, his voice carrying a warning. She just prevented a war with Philip's dire wolves using nothing but her voice, something our weapons have failed to do for years. That silenced the room. Edith's eyes widened slightly, and she took another look at me, this time with more interest than dismissal. Is this true? She asked me directly. I nodded. They were going to attack us. I just talked to them, I guess, in my way. Edith crossed her arms. That would be useful, Edith admitted, her military mind clearly running through tactical applications. If it's genuine, I felt my cheeks flush. Always the same, people thinking I was broken or lying. But before I could say anything, Calvin spoke up. I witnessed it myself, General. Philip's entire pack was ready to tear us apart. Thelma walked right up to them, used her spirit voice, and they backed down. More than that, they helped us. Christian made a dismissive gesture. A lucky encounter. We need more than. Luck had nothing to do with it, Calvin cut him off, his voice sharp enough to make everyone straighten up. The spirit voice is ancient magic, older than our kingdoms, older than our wars. He turned to me. Would you demonstrate? All those eyes on me made my stomach clench. Back in Iron Ridge, I'd been punished for my whisper howl, told to keep that broken sound to myself. Now here was Calvin asking me to do it in front of a room full of strangers. Go on, he said gently. Show them who you are. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and let it out, that soft, melodic sound that wasn't quite a howl, but something else entirely. I kept it brief, just enough to fill the room before letting it fade away. When I opened my eyes, the change was immediate. The tension had drained from everyone's postures. Edith's hand had dropped from where it had been resting on her weapon. Even Christian looked slightly dazed. That was... Edith trailed off, blinking like she was coming out of a trance. Remarkable, finished a woman I hadn't been introduced to yet. She stepped forward, her eyes bright with interest. I felt it, like a blanket settling over my thoughts. Calvin nodded. Thelma will be joining my inner council effective immediately. Her gift may be the key to preventing all-out war with the other territories. There were a few muttered objections, but nobody challenged him directly. Calvin dismissed the council shortly after, saying we'd reconvene tomorrow after everyone had time to process. As the room emptied, I stood awkwardly by the big table, not sure what to do with myself. Don't mind Christian, Edith said, stopping beside me on her way out. He questions everything new until it proves itself. Military habit. She studied me for a moment. Your old pack, they were fools. She left before I could respond, her boots echoing on the stone floor. Calvin walked me to a suite of rooms that would be mine. Actual rooms, with a real bed and furniture and windows looking out over snow-covered peaks. More space than I'd ever had to myself. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow we start working on how to use your gift to save a kingdom. After he left, I wandered around touching things, the soft blankets, the carved wooden desk, the leather-bound books on shelves. None of it felt real. Just a week ago, I'd been dying alone in a frozen train car, rejected and worthless. I went to the window and looked out at the mountains bathed in moonlight. Below me, I could see parts of Calvin's kingdom, buildings nestled against the mountainside, people moving about with purpose. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, and others joined in, a proper howl, the kind I'd never been able to make. I answered with my whisper howl, letting it drift out the window into the night. To my surprise, the wolves fell silent for a moment, then resumed with a different tone, almost like they were answering me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel broken. Different, yeah, but maybe different wasn't the same as wrong. Maybe I was exactly what I was supposed to be. And maybe, just maybe, I'd finally found where I belonged. The message came at breakfast, a scout with snow in his hair and panic in his eyes. 3 bears from the Frost Bear clan had been found dead at our southern border, and Chief Brianna Gregory was howling for blood. Not literally howling, mind you. Bear shifters don't howl, but she was making noise all right, sending messengers with terms that amounted to, "Give us half your hunting grounds, or we'll take them." I'd been at Calvin's mountain stronghold for nearly 2 weeks by then, still getting used to having my own rooms, still flinching when people called me advisor instead of defective. But there I was sitting at the big oak table while Calvin and his war council argued over maps. "We cannot cede the Silver Pine Valley," General Edith said, jabbing her finger at the parchment. "Half our winter meat comes from there." Christian Singh, still looking at me like I might be some kind of fraud, shook his head. "And we cannot afford open war with the bears. Not with Philip's dire wolves pressing from the north." Calvin rubbed his temples. Hadn't seen him look that tired since I'd bandaged him up in that train car. "What about your gift?" he asked, golden eyes finding mine across the table. "Could you speak with them?" Everyone went quiet. 7 faces turned to me, waiting. My throat went dry. I've never tried with bears before, just wolves and smaller things. "Bears are just big, grumpy forest puppies," Doris Daniels said. The scout captain winked at me. She'd been one of the first to actually treat me like a person, rather than some mystical curiosity. "Bet they'd listen to your spirit voice, same as anything else." I twisted the napkin in my lap. I could try, better than fighting, right? And that's how I found myself trudging through knee-deep snow 2 days later, following Evan Ortega toward the neutral meeting ground. Evan was Calvin's top diplomat, tall, thin guy with perfect posture and this way of talking that made even threats sound polite. "Remember," he said, glancing back at me, "Chief Brianna has lost 3 of her people. She will be emotional." "You mean pissed," Doris cut in, scanning the tree line. She'd insisted on coming along as security, though what one wolf would do against angry bears, I wasn't sure. The clearing appeared ahead, marked by 7 ancient pines in a perfect circle, and waiting for us, 3 massive figures, larger than any humans had a right to be. Chief Brianna Gregory stood front and center, near 6 feet tall with shoulders like a linebacker. Her dark skin was marked with ritual scars across her shoulders, visible even in the cold because she wore only a leather vest despite the freezing temperature. Bear shifters run hot. Her thick black hair had these striking white streaks woven into elaborate braids, and when she saw us, her dark eyes narrowed to slits. "Wolf King sends his pet speaker instead of facing me himself?" Her voice rumbled like distant thunder. Evan stepped forward, all diplomatic smoothness. "Chief Brianna, the king sends his most valued advisor to help resolve this matter peacefully." The woman to Brianna's right, nearly as big with copper-colored hair, spat in the snow. "3 of our brothers dead on your border, and you speak of peace." "3 of our elk hunters missing as well," Doris shot back. "Found their blood by the eastern creek." "Lies," the copper-haired woman shouted. I could feel it building, the anger, the misunderstandings. Same old pattern that's kept shifter clans fighting since forever. Someone loses people, blames the other side, revenge follows, and on until nobody remembers how it started. "Please," I said, stepping between them. My voice sounded thin in the winter air. "I'm here to listen, to both sides." Brianna looked me up and down, probably wondering how someone my size could be any kind of threat or help. And how will you do that, little wolf? I took a deep breath. I have a gift. I can speak to the spirits of your clan, if you'll allow it. The bears exchanged looks, surprise, suspicion, curiosity. The spirit voice, Brianna said slowly. The old stories speak of such a gift. Prove it. My heart hammered against my ribs. The only audience I'd had for my whisper howl before Calvin had been wolves. But I closed my eyes, reached deep inside for that place where the sound lived, and let it out. The whisper howl started soft, like always, but I let it build. Not louder exactly, but deeper, richer, reaching for something I couldn't name but somehow knew was there. I felt a strange tug inside my chest, like something answering. When I opened my eyes, Brianna was staring at me with her mouth slightly open. Behind her, something shimmered in the air, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt, but in the shape of a massive bear. Not fully there, but not fully gone either. The clan spirits, she whispered. They're answering you. The shimmer grew stronger, and in my head I heard a voice, deep, ancient, angry. It showed me images. A creek running black with oily poison, bear cubs convulsing after drinking, warriors finding wolf tracks nearby. I turned to Doris, who was watching with wide eyes. The bears found poison in their water, and wolf tracks nearby. Doris frowned. That's impossible. We'd never. But another image flashed in my mind, this time of wolves drinking from a different stream, collapsing, and bear tracks found afterward. The same happened to your missing hunters, I said, turning back to the bears. Poisoned water, but they found bear tracks. Evan's diplomatic mask slipped. Someone setting both sides against each other. The shimmering bear spirit showed me more, a path through the mountains, a hidden valley, strange metal containers being emptied into the headwaters that fed both territories. The clan spirits can show us where the poison comes from, I said, but we need to work together to find who's doing this. Brianna studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. Show us. 4 days of hard tracking followed. Evan stayed behind to keep communications open between Calvin and Brianna, while Doris and I joined 3 bear trackers to follow the spirits' guidance. The bear spirits would appear to me at night, showing me landmarks, guiding our path up into the high country where the watersheds began. On the 3rd day, Doris spotted the first real evidence, a boot print that wasn't wolf or bear design, something with a distinctive tread pattern. Military, she whispered, crouching in the snow. Not Northern Kingdom issue. The smallest of the bear trackers, though still a head taller than me, sniffed the air. Human scent, mixed with metal and chemicals. We followed the trail cautiously, and I started reaching out to the local wildlife, squirrels, foxes, birds. Their impressions came in flashes. Men in dark clothes, barrels loaded on sleds, the stink of something that burned their noses. At dawn on the 4th day, we found it. A cabin built into the side of a mountain, cleverly disguised with brush and snow. Through my connection with a raven perched overhead, I could see men moving equipment between the cabin and a cave entrance. 6 men, I whispered to Doris as we watched from the cover of pines. Armed. She nodded, signaling the bears to spread out. We needed evidence before confronting them, proof that would convince both Calvin and Brianna. The smallest bear tracker shifted, bones cracking quietly as he became human. A young man with the same copper hair as the woman from the meeting. I can get closer, he whispered. They won't expect a human. Before we could argue, he was moving downslope, hunched and casual like a hunter passing through. The rest of us crept closer, using the trees for cover. I focused on the ravens, asking them to watch, to show me what they saw. Through their eyes, I spotted a familiar face emerging from the cabin. Randy Arnold, a known troublemaker who'd been exiled from 3 different packs for stirring up conflicts. He was talking to the copper-haired man, smiling and gesturing toward the cabin. The raven showed me inside as it landed on a window ledge. Stacks of weapons, maps of both territories with attack routes marked, and barrels labeled with skull symbols. On a table lay documents, sales agreements for the weapons, with buyers from both wolf and bear territories. When the copper-haired man returned, his eyes were wide. It's Randy Arnold. He's selling weapons to fringe groups on both sides, telling each that the other is planning a major attack. Doris cursed under her breath. And poisoning the water to create incidents that support his lies. We need those documents, I said, and samples of the poison to prove it matches what killed both wolves and bears. The largest bear tracker rumbled. We take it now. Crush them. Doris shook her head. Too risky. We need the evidence intact. I closed my eyes, reaching out again with my whisper howl, asking for help. The ravens answered, as did foxes and even a passing moose. A plan formed, a way to create a distraction while we retrieved what we needed. That evening, as Randy and his men gathered around a fire outside the cabin, nature itself seemed to turn against them. Ravens dive-bombed their heads, foxes raided their stores, and a massive bull moose charged through their camp, scattering men and equipment. In the chaos, Doris and I slipped into the cabin while the bear trackers secured the cave entrance. I grabbed the documents while Doris collected poison samples in small glass vials she'd brought. In less than 5 minutes, we had everything we needed. Proof that Randy had been deliberately poisoning both territories, creating a conflict he could profit from by selling weapons to both sides. As we melted back into the forest, documents and samples secure in Doris's pack, I felt something I hadn't expected: pride. Not just in using my gift, but in finding a truth that could prevent a war, that could save lives on both sides. This is enough, Doris said, patting the pack. With this evidence, we can unite against the real enemy. The copper-haired tracker nodded solemnly. Our chiefs will see the truth. The blood of our brothers will be avenged against the right foe. I looked back at the cabin, where Randy was shouting orders, unaware that his scheme had been exposed. Some family you find, I murmured, remembering Calvin's words from when he'd found me. And some you stop from tearing each other apart. I laid out the papers we'd stolen from Randy's cabin across Calvin's war table, like I was dealing cards. General Edith picked one up, her eyebrows climbing higher as she read. Son of a bitch, she muttered. Look at these shipping manifests. He's been selling weapons to both sides. The vial of poison sat in the middle of the table, this innocent-looking clear liquid that had killed 3 bears and nearly started a war. Chief Brianna Gregory stood opposite me, her massive hands planted on the table's edge, knuckles white with rage. My people, she said, voice thick with emotion. Dead because this vermin wanted to profit from our fighting. Calvin moved beside me, his shoulder brushing mine as he leaned over to examine a map with Randy's handwriting all over it. He's marked territories, Calvin said. Places where he planned to stir up more trouble once we were weakened from fighting each other. Christian Singh, who'd been so skeptical of me when I first arrived, nodded grimly. This is detailed work. He's been planning this for months, maybe years. Brianna looked up at me then, her dark eyes hard but respectful. Your gift saved many lives today, Wolf Speaker. Without your ability to see what truly happened, we would be at war by morning. I felt my face flush hot, wasn't used to praise, especially not from someone as powerful as the Bear Chief. I just wanted the truth, I said, my voice quiet like always. Nobody deserves to die for someone else's greed. Calvin's hand found the small of my back, a warm presence that steadied me. This is why the spirit voice was given to you, Thelma. Not just to talk to animals, but to find understanding where others see only conflict. We spent the next 3 hours hammering out a joint operation to take down Randy and his men. Bears and wolves working together, something I'd never thought I'd see. Every time the discussion heated up, I'd find myself speaking, not even trying to use my gift, just talking sense. And people listened. Me, the defective one, the one my pack had left to die in a blizzard, now sitting at a table with kings and chiefs, my words carrying weight. 2 weeks later, Randy Arnold was in chains. Our joint forces had surrounded his operation, and with both bears and wolves working together, his men didn't stand a chance. The evidence we'd gathered was enough to condemn him 10 times over. I stood in the great hall of Calvin's mountain stronghold as representatives from 6 different northern clans gathered to witness justice. Randy's face was a mask of hatred as they led him in, but when he spotted me standing beside Calvin, that mask slipped. You, he snarled. the little nothing, the wolf who can't even howl. I just looked at him steady. Funny how things turn out, isn't it? After the sentencing, exile to the frozen wastes, which was practically a death sentence, Calvin called for quiet. The hall fell silent, hundreds of eyes turning our way, my heart hammered against my ribs. Never been comfortable with attention. Today marks a new chapter for the Northern Kingdoms, Calvin announced, his voice carrying to every corner. For too long we've been divided, wolf against bear, shifter against shifter, and in our division, we created opportunity for those who would destroy us all. He turned to me then, those golden eyes of his warm as summer. Without warning, he took my hand and raised it high. This woman, with her gift of the spirit voice, has shown us a better path, one of understanding instead of bloodshed. I wanted to disappear into the floor. My cheeks burned so hot I thought they might catch fire. Therefore, I'm creating a new position within our kingdom, the voice of peace. His fingers tightened around mine, and I claimed Thelma Fig as both this voice and as my mate. The hall exploded with sound. Cheers, howls, the bear's deep roars. I stood there frozen, not quite believing what I'd heard. Mate, I whispered, when I could finally speak. His smile was small, private. If you'll have me, I nodded, words failing me completely. That night, after the celebrations, after Calvin had shown me exactly what being his mate meant in the privacy of our chambers, I stood at the window looking out at the moon. My fingers traced the silver band he'd placed on my wrist, marked with the ancient symbols of his lineage. Voice of peace, I said to myself, testing how the words felt. Not bad at all. A month later, word came that the Iron Ridge Pack, my old pack, was requesting an alliance with the Northern Kingdoms. They'd heard about Randy's defeat, about the new unity among the Northern clans, and they wanted in. You don't have to be there, Calvin said as we lay in bed the night before their arrival. I can handle Colton. I shook my head, watching shadows play across the ceiling. No, I need to be there. He hurt you, I rolled to face him. He did. And now he'll see what became of the defective wolf he left to die. The next morning, I dressed with special care. Nothing fancy, that wasn't me, but clean, well-made clothes that showed my position. The silver band on my wrist caught the light as I braided my hair. When they entered the great hall, I saw Colton first. He looked older than I remembered, his face more lined. Behind him came faces I recognized, packmates who'd watched in silence as he'd declared me worthless. Some couldn't meet my eyes. Calvin sat in his great chair, but I remained standing, a deliberate choice. Colton's eyes widened when he saw me, recognition and disbelief washing over his face. Thelma, he said, forgetting protocol completely. I nodded. Alpha Colton, it's been a while. He recovered quickly, but I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. The defective Omega now standing at the right hand of the Wolf King, wearing his mate's band. You look well, he managed. I am well, I replied simply. The meeting proceeded, with Colton outlining why an alliance would benefit both packs. Calvin let him talk, then turned to me. What say you, voice of peace? Should we ally with the Iron Ridge Pack? The hall fell silent. Every member of my former pack stared, some with open mouths. The Omega they'd abandoned now held their fate in her hands. I studied them, these wolves who'd never seen value in me, who judged my worth by the strength of my howl rather than the strength of my heart. I could have rejected them. Part of me wanted to. Instead, I spoke calmly, laying out terms that would protect both kingdoms while giving the Iron Ridge Pack the security they sought. Fair terms, just terms. And I added, looking directly at Colton, you will accept any member of your pack, regardless of their gifts or differences. No more abandoning those who don't fit your idea of what a wolf should be. Colton swallowed hard, then nodded. Agreed. When the meeting ended and the alliance was settled, one of the younger Iron Ridge wolves approached me tentatively. Is it true, she asked, her voice barely audible, that you can talk to the spirits with your howl? I smiled at her. Would you like to hear it? She nodded eagerly. I closed my eyes and let my whisper howl rise. That soft sound that had once brought me nothing but shame. The sound flowed through the hall, touching each person there. When I opened my eyes, The Iron Ridge wolves were staring at me with awe. What they'd once called my defect had become my greatest strength. The thing that had marked me as different, as less than, had elevated me beyond anything they could have imagined. I wasn't just Thelma the defective anymore. I was Thelma Fig, mate to the Wolf King, voice of peace for the Northern Kingdoms. Funny how things turn out sometimes.